Ethan never thought silence could feel so heavy. The small office at the edge of the spaceport was quiet, yet it pressed down on him like gravity from a dying star. The walls were cold metal, scratched by years of desperate people who had stood here before him. A single white light hung above, flickering softly, as if even it was unsure it wanted to stay. Ethan stood in the center of the room, hands clenched, staring at a data screen that carried only one message: his father was gone. The debt was not. Hours earlier, Ethan had been repairing cargo drones on Dock 7, doing the same honest work he had done since he was 16. He lived a simple life, paid his fees, and avoided trouble. His father, however, had always chased luck across the stars. Gambling halls, alien games, strange odds. Ethan had warned him many times. But warnings meant nothing to a man who believed the next bet would fix everything. This time, it didn't single quotes T. The message on the screen scrolled again, cold and official. Under interstellar law, unpaid gambling debt did not disappear with the debtor. It transferred to blood. Ethan felt his breath slow as the meaning settled in. This was not money. This was service. Forced labor under alien syndicates, sometimes lasting a lifetime. Sometimes ending much sooner. 2 armored guards stood near the door, their armor marked with symbols Ethan did not recognize. They did not look angry or cruel. That was worse. They looked bored, as if collecting lives was routine. One of them checked a timer on his wrist. Ethan realized they were waiting for him to break, to beg, to run. He did none of those things. He simply stood there, carrying a burden he never chose. Ethan thought of his father, then not with hate, but with tired disappointment. He remembered nights waiting by the window, hoping his father would come home sober. He remembered promises made and broken, smiles that hid fear. Part of him wanted to scream that this was unfair. But another part, the deeper part, understood something simple. Running would not erase the debt. Someone would pay it. If not him, then someone weaker. The guards stepped forward. One raised a device to bind Ethan's wrists. That was when the air in the room changed. It was subtle, like the moment before a storm breaks. Ethan felt it before he saw her. She stood near the far wall, unnoticed until now. Tall, slender, with skin that shimmered faintly like starlight on water. Her eyes were large and dark, reflecting more than the room itself. She did not wear armor, only simple clothing marked with symbols of authority Ethan could not read. She had been watching the entire time. The guards froze when they noticed her. They stepped back immediately, lowering their weapons. That alone told Ethan she was dangerous, not by force, but by position. She moved closer, her steps silent against the metal floor. Ethan met her gaze, expecting cold judgment or alien disgust. Instead, he saw curiosity. Deep, careful curiosity. She studied him as if he were a puzzle rather than a criminal. Her eyes flicked briefly to the data screen, then back to his face. Ethan did not look away. He had nothing left to lose. If this was the end of his freedom, he would face it standing. The alien girl stopped an arm's length from him. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but clear, shaped carefully around human words. "You are not the debtor," she said. Ethan nodded slowly. "No," he replied, "but the debt is mine now." That answer seemed to interest her more than anything else. Her head tilted slightly, as if recalculating something unseen. Behind her calm expression, thoughts moved fast. She had seen humans before begging, bargaining, blaming. This one did none of that. She leaned closer and lowered her voice, so only Ethan could hear. "Your species often refuses responsibility for another's failure," she said. "Especially when abandoned." Ethan swallowed. "Then maybe you have been watching the wrong humans." For the first time, something like a smile touched her lips. Not kindness, not mercy, something sharper. She glanced at the guards, then back at Ethan, and whispered the words that would change everything. "Can you pay it?" The question hung in the air, heavier than chains. Ethan did not know who she was or why she cared. He only knew the answer forming in his chest. He straightened his back, lifted his head, and met her eyes. The room felt different. After Ethan answered, the guards did not move. The lights above seemed dimmer, as if the station itself was listening. The alien girl stepped back slowly, her eyes never leaving Ethan. She had asked the question many times before to many beings across the stars, and almost all had failed it. Humans usually argued, cried, or begged. Ethan had done none of those things. That alone made him dangerous. In a quiet, unexpected way, her name was Lyra, though Ethan did not know it yet. She belonged to a species that did not rule by force, but by observation. Her people watched civilizations rise and fall, believing emotion made species weak. Humans were a curiosity to them, chaotic, loud, and short-lived. Lyra had been assigned to study human behavior near the outer systems. She had expected fear. She had expected excuses. What she saw unsettled her. Ethan was released from the bind device, though the guards stayed close. Lyra raised one hand and they stepped away without protest. That single gesture told Ethan she was not just another alien official. She circled him slowly, studying his posture, his breathing, his eyes. He was afraid, but he was steady. That combination was rare even among hardened species. She spoke again, this time louder, so the guards could hear. She declared that the debt transfer would be delayed under observer authority. That word alone carried weight across the station. The guards hesitated, then complied. Ethan felt a brief moment of relief, but it did not feel like freedom. It felt like the pause before something larger. Lyra explained that the debt would not be erased. Instead, it would become a trial. Not punishment, but proof. A chance to show what kind of species humans truly were. Ethan listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that survival often depended on listening more than speaking. She told him that most species abandoned responsibility when it became painful. They believed survival meant self-preservation above all else. Humans, however, confused her. They formed families, bonds, and promises, even when logic said not to. They carried guilt across generations. They fought wars over ideas. They died for strangers. That behavior made no sense to Lyra and her people. It made humans inefficient but strangely powerful. Ethan asked one question. He asked what happened if he failed. Lyra answered honestly. Failure meant the original punishment would return, and worse, the council would record humanity as unreliable, selfish, and weak. That record would follow humans for centuries. Trade would suffer, borders would close, and humans would be watched not as equals, but as risks. Ethan felt the weight of that truth settle into his chest. This was no longer about his father. This was no longer about debt. He represented something larger than himself, and that scared him more than chains ever could. Lyra watched the realization appear on his face. She had expected anger or panic. Instead, she saw resolve. Humans always surprised her at the worst possible moment. She turned and walked toward the exit. Ethan followed without being told. The station corridors were busy with alien workers and travelers. None of them noticed the moment history shifted beside them. As they walked, Lyra explained the rules. Ethan would be sent to several systems to complete tasks. No other species wanted dangerous work, unforgiving environments, impossible deadlines. No special treatment, no protection. Failure would be recorded publicly. Success would be watched closely. Ethan did not ask for mercy. He only nodded. He had grown up fixing broken things left behind by others. This felt familiar in a painful way. Lyra stopped before a transport gate. She faced him again, and for the first time her voice softened. She told him she did not believe humans would pass. This was not an insult, it was honesty. Her people rarely believed any species could change its nature. Ethan met her gaze and answered calmly. Humans did not change their nature, he said. They revealed it under pressure. Something shifted in Lyra, then a small fracture in certainty. She stepped aside and activated the gate. The first trial waited beyond as Ethan walked forward. Lyra watched closely, recording every step. Somewhere far away, a council waited for results, confident they already knew the outcome. The transport gate closed behind Ethan, and the sound faded into nothing. He stood on a platform above a red mining world where the air burned the lungs and the sky never rested. Workers from many species moved below, their bodies bent from endless labor. Machines screamed day and night, pulling rare minerals from the ground. This was where debts were buried and forgotten. Ethan understood this place was designed to break will, not bodies. He was given no welcome and no guidance, only a task board. That changed every cycle. Each task was marked impossible by those who came before. Broken machines, toxic tunnels, unstable ground, and time limits that mocked effort. Other workers watched him with dull eyes, expecting him to fail like the rest. Some laughed quietly, others turned away, already tired of hope. Ethan began where no one else would. He repaired machines others feared touching. He learned alien tools by watching, and by trying. He worked through pain and exhaustion, not because he believed he would win, but because stopping meant accepting the lie that he was weak. Days turned into cycles and cycles into weeks. His hands bled and healed. His back ached, yet he stood again every time aliens began to notice, not because he was strongest or fastest, but because he did not quit. When a machine crushed a worker from a smaller species, Ethan pulled them free without thinking. He gave up rest time to help strangers who offered nothing in return. That confused the overseers and angered the system. The system expected isolation, fear, obedience. Ethan offered none of those. Lyra watched from orbit unseen. She reviewed reports that made no sense. Productivity increased where Ethan worked, conflicts dropped. Workers shared resources instead of hoarding them. This was not efficiency by command. This was unity by choice. Her people had never valued such behavior. They saw cooperation as weakness, yet here it created strength. One cycle, a tunnel collapsed, trapping several workers beneath. Toxic stone overseers marked the loss acceptable. Ethan ignored the order to stand down. He entered the tunnel alone, using broken equipment and raw determination. He guided others to safety one by one. When he emerged, he collapsed from exhaustion. But everyone was alive. That moment spread like fire across the camps. Aliens spoke of the human who paid a debt not his own. The human who risked himself without being told. The human who treated strangers as kin. Fear turned into respect. Respect into loyalty. The observers updated their records. Humanity was no longer labeled selfish. It was labeled unpredictable. That word carried danger. Lyra felt something she had no word for. It was not pride and not fear. It was awareness. Humans did not endure because they enjoyed suffering. They endured because they believed survival meant more than self-preservation. That belief threatened every system built on control. The trial was far from over, but the galaxy had begun to watch. Ethan no longer worked alone on the mining world. Wherever he walked, others followed, not because they were ordered, but because they chose to. The camps that once felt silent and defeated now carried quiet movement and purpose. Workers shared tools, shared water, shared time. They protected each other from danger and exhaustion. The overseers noticed control slipping away, not through rebellion but through unity. The system reacted quickly. Work quotas were raised, food rations were reduced, safety limits were ignored. The trial became harsher than before. The observers wanted to see how long this strange human influence would last. They believed pressure would break it. Ethan felt the change immediately. He saw weaker workers collapse more often. He saw fear return to familiar faces. He understood the message. The system was testing not just him but everyone around him. Instead of pulling back, Ethan stepped forward. He worked longer hours. He took the most dangerous tasks. He spoke little, but his actions were loud. When others saw him endure, they endured. When others felt fear, they remembered he had faced worse and stood again. Lyra watched from above, reviewing live feeds. Her reports grew longer and more difficult to explain. According to logic, the camp should have collapsed. According to probability, Ethan should have failed. Instead, productivity rose, morale stabilized, and violence disappeared. Humans were not enforcing order. They were inspiring it. The council questioned her conclusions. They reminded her that humans were historically unstable, prone to conflict and emotional decisions. Lyra responded with evidence, footage, data, outcomes. She explained that humanity did not remove emotion from survival. They used it as fuel that made them dangerous in ways the Council did not fully understand on the surface. Ethan faced his greatest test yet. A reactor deep in the mines began to overload. Overseers ordered evacuation, marking the entire lower sector. Lost hundreds of workers would be buried alive. Ethan heard the alarms and ran toward them. Others followed without hesitation. Different species, different languages, one purpose. They worked together, clearing paths, stabilizing systems, carrying the injured. The air burned, the ground shook. Time ran thin. Ethan reached the core chamber alone. He knew the system was failing, and that stopping it would likely cost his life. He remembered his father for the first time in many cycles. Not with anger, not with blame, only with understanding. People made mistakes, humanity paid for them. He forced the override by hand, burning skin and muscle. The system stabilized, the explosion never came. Ethan collapsed but lived. The rescue was complete. No lives were lost across the galaxy. Observers fell silent. Records updated again. Humanity was no longer labeled unpredictable. Humanity was labeled resilient. Lyra felt certainty crack. She realized something terrifying. The humans were not special because of strength or intelligence. They were special because they refused to let others fall alone. The Council issued a new order. End the trial. Lyra delayed. The galaxy was learning something important, and she would not stop it yet. The order arrived without ceremony. Lyra received it in silence as the mining world continued its endless rhythm. The Council demanded immediate termination of the trial. Ethan was to be removed, his memory altered, and the system restored to standard control. Humanity would be recorded as a temporary anomaly, nothing more. The observers would move on. Lyra stood alone in the observation chamber, staring at the words. She had followed the rules her entire life. Observation without interference, judgment without attachment. Yet the data before her no longer felt like numbers. It felt like truth, and truth carried weight on the surface. Ethan sensed something was wrong. The overseers had grown nervous. Their authority returned suddenly and sharply. Guards appeared in greater numbers. Workers were separated again. Tools were locked away. The unity that had formed was being cut apart piece by piece. Ethan realized the system was afraid. Lyra descended to the surface for the first time since the trial began. When she approached Ethan, the guard stepped back out of habit and fear. She told him everything: the Council decision, the memory wipe, the release. His debt would be marked paid. The others would remain. Ethan listened without anger. He looked around at the workers who now watched in silence. Species from different worlds, bound by shared struggle. They had trusted him. Lyra told him he could walk away. No pain, no chains, no responsibility. His life would return to normal. He would forget everything. Ethan asked one question. He asked what would happen to the others. Lyra answered honestly, nothing would change. That answer settled like stone in Ethan's chest. He remembered every person he had pulled from danger, every hand that had reached for his. He remembered how fear had turned into hope because someone refused to look away. He refused the offer. Lyra warned him this choice would end any chance of freedom. The Council would see defiance as proof of instability. Humanity would suffer consequences. Ethan stood taller. He said freedom that required abandoning others was not freedom at all. The workers heard him. Fear shifted again, but this time into resolve. They stepped closer, forming a wall around him. The guards hesitated. They had never been trained for this. Lyra saw the truth clearly now. This was not rebellion for power. This was loyalty born from shared pain. Humanity did not rise alone. They lifted others with them. She broke protocol. Lyra transmitted an unsanctioned report to the Council. Not data, not predictions, but footage, faces, voices, choices. She showed them what unity looked like under oppression. She showed them Ethan refusing freedom. She ended the message with a single statement: humanity cannot be controlled by fear. The Council responded with silence. Then with threat, military intervention was authorized. Lyra stayed. Ethan turned to the workers and spoke quietly. He told them not to fight, not with violence. He told them to stand together and refuse to break. He told them the galaxy was watching, and it was across systems human traders, crews, and colonies began to hear whispers of what was happening. News spread through unofficial channels. Humans stopped cooperating with exploitative contracts. Peaceful resistance grew. The debt had become something else, a line the galaxy could not ignore. The first ships arrived in orbit without warning. Silent, massive, and unmistakably military. Their shadows crossed the surface of the mining world like dark omens. The Council had decided that observation was no longer enough. Control would be restored by force if necessary. The overseers straightened with renewed confidence, believing power had returned to its rightful hands. Ethan looked up at the sky and felt no fear, only clarity. He had known this moment would come. When systems built on fear are challenged, they always respond the same way. He gathered the workers not to prepare for battle, but to prepare for endurance. Across the camp, alarms echoed. Orders were shouted in languages few understood. Weapons were displayed, but not fired. The Council wanted obedience, not destruction. Yet something had changed. The workers did not scatter. They did not kneel. They stood together, unmoving, united. Lyra walked beside Ethan, fully aware that her career, her status, and her future were already lost. She transmitted live feeds across every open channel, not just to the Council, but to trade networks, diplomatic stations, and independent observers. She wanted the galaxy to see what happened when power faced quiet resistance. The military commanders issued their demands. Ethan was ordered to surrender and accept removal. The workers were ordered to return to their positions and forget what had happened. No one moved. Ethan stepped forward alone. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He spoke calmly, explaining that inherited debt was a lie built to protect those who exploited others. He said humans had lived under such systems before, and had learned one truth: fear works only until people stop believing in it. The silence that followed was heavier than weapons. Humans across the galaxy watched the broadcast. Dock workers, traders, engineers, and pilots recognized the look on Ethan's face. They had worn it themselves at some point in their lives. The look of someone who had decided kneeling was no longer an option. Human crews began to refuse unfair contracts. They grounded ships, closed ports, and walked away from profit without violence. Without shouting, systems dependent on human labor felt the strain within cycles. The Council felt it too. Trade slowed, supply chains fractured. Diplomatic partners asked questions. Observers could no longer label humanity as unstable without ignoring evidence. Humanity was organized not by command, but by shared values. On the mining world, the military hesitated. Force would spark open conflict and expose the truth the Council feared. Humans would not break easily. They would adapt, endure, and resist. Lyra received a final message from the Council: stand down or be erased. She closed the channel. The commanders withdrew weapons and opened negotiations. For the first time in recorded history, an observer council negotiated with debtors. Ethan did not claim victory. He asked for change, the end of inherited debt laws, fair treatment across species, recognition of shared responsibility. The galaxy listened. The agreement did not come quickly, and it did not come easily. Negotiations stretched across many cycles, filled with tension, silence, and quiet resistance. Yet the mining world remained calm. Workers stayed united, and human networks continued their peaceful stand. The galaxy watched a species once dismissed as reckless, now acting with patience and control. The Council finally spoke, not with authority, but with caution. They announced the suspension of inherited debt laws across all observed systems. It was a temporary measure, they claimed. Yet everyone understood what it truly was: a surrender without humiliation. Systems built on fear had bent, not broken, but they would never stand the same again. Ethan stood among the workers when the announcement reached the surface. There was no cheering, no celebration, only relief. He had not sought glory, and he did not claim leadership. He had simply refused to abandon others, and that had been enough. Lyra stood beside him, no longer an observer, But a witness, she had been removed from council protection, and her future was uncertain. Yet she felt no regret. She had seen something rare. A species that carried its flaws openly and still chose responsibility as order slowly returned the council. Requested one final matter. Ethan's father had been located alive hiding in a distant system. His original debt was confirmed, and under the new law, it would no longer pass to blood. The council offered Ethan the right to punishment or restitution. Ethan asked to meet him. The reunion was quiet. A tired man faced the son he had failed. Words came slowly, apologies were offered, not erased. Ethan did not forgive everything, but he forgave enough. He understood now that humanity's strength was not perfection but accountability. Ethan walked away without revenge, without hatred. The galaxy recorded the moment. Lyra prepared to leave the mining world. Her assignment was over, but her understanding had changed. She told Ethan that her people once believed survival required detachment. She admitted they were wrong. Ethan replied that humans had learned the same lesson long ago. That caring hurt, but not caring destroyed everything. Humanity's reputation shifted across the stars, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as a species that paid debts with honor and refused to let others fall alone. As the workers returned to their worlds, they carried the story with them. A story of unity, endurance, and choice. The debt that was never meant to be paid had reshaped law, belief, and power. Lyra departed carrying one final record. Humanity does not break when abandoned. Humanity becomes something the galaxy must respect, and the stars remembered.